next year.
Yeah.
But actually, we're going to talk about both the Rift Rivals today, what happened in NA versus EU, what happened in LCK LPL, and then also talk about the state of the game and NA LCS Week 4, which is upcoming. But first off, we have to note that we lost the Dive Euphoria bet. And we will make good on it, but turnaround time on a high-quality promo is long. So we'll have it probably by next week's episode.
Honestly, I have a positive outlook on this. You know, anything that I do, I want to do it well. Yeah. So now we've got a new project, and this is actually an opportunity for success here.
Exactly.
We're going to make a good promotional video for our good friends over in Europe. They need some of our help.
Yep.
And really, we're being charitable here.
Yeah, we've got their back. You know, this is going to be like an Oscar-winning
Oh, it's going to be good.
It's going to be heart-wrenching. There's going to be drama. It'll be incredible.
Why did it come about, though? I think we should dive into how we lost to Europe, because to a lot of people watching and to us as well, we were very shocked at how North America, well, a lot of the teams, they would give these joke answers like, oh, if we play against Heimer, we're forfeiting at 1 minute.
Yeah.
Instead of, well, we know that guys like, then they lost to Heimer every single time.
Yeah.
As well as to Aatrox every single time. Yeah. While there are players in North America, like Deathfleet, that took the initiative to, to find out from guys like Heisendong, there are resources there, high ELO, Challenger, Heimerdinger players, so, learn the new meta and learn that stuff. He wasn't in this tournament. And it seemed like the teams that we did have in this tournament did not put the full emphasis on Aatrox or Heimerdinger, or even really get that good at funneling comps.
Yeah, and to me, like the Heimerdinger one feels more egregious because EU has been doing it like the whole
since
split,
week 1,
right? And it's even been in LPL, it's been in LMS, it's been I think even maybe once in LCK, not positive, I can't remember, but either way, it's been around for a while, right? So, and I don't even feel like you had to play Heimer, but learn a strategy against Heimer, right? Like again, kind of referencing that Heisendong video, and one of the 80 carries he talks about that are really tough for Heimer to deal with is Sivir, right? Sivir can spell shield a lot of the stuff very easily. You can ricochet down the turrets. Like there are some things that should be a decent answer. And if you really can't learn the champion in time, you don't have a counter pick, then you just need to accept, well, we're at a disadvantage and pick ban, and you have to ban that champion, right? But like it just seemed like we didn't prepare from any angle. We couldn't play it. We didn't know what to play into it, and we didn't ban it. So we kind of failed on all 3 counts.
And I'm actually pretty disappointed because we played on patch 813B. Which was actually something that had been hotfixed a couple days before the tournament. And the pro team said they would rather play on that patch because it's more preparing them for the next week of LCS and their standings there. So I think it's completely unacceptable that NA had less practice on Aatrox than the EU teams who literally had to travel from Europe. So they lost 2 days, 1.5 days in transit, and they were the ones that knew how to play new Aatrox compared to North America, who had nothing to do but practice while EU was on the plane.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, while the Heimerdinger was more egregious to you, my eyeballs could not handle the beatings that these Aatrox were laying upon, especially Echo Box, both Phoenix and Huni. Definitely felt that one, trying to continue to pick Renekton into him. Yeah. I mean, I played like one game of Aatrox because I got autofilled to mid lane. I was like, whatever. I'm autofilled. I'll play Aatrox, the new champion, because I was into Galio, and I was like, it could work. And I went legendary the first game, and I was like, he's broken. This guy's insane.
Results-based analysis. Hell yeah.
Exactly. But like you're saying, in the top lane, it seemed like there was just this super high first pick emphasis from all the EU teams.
Yep.
Not just a couple of them on the champion. And maybe it was a case of our teams are, trying out these counters and we're like, okay, this Renekton, they found something with that. Or I really liked Fiora from what I saw from it in other examples of high elo solo queue and stuff. It felt like because, our teams, the other way to look at it is our teams were like, okay, we're going to play it on the new patch and we're going to learn a lot during Rift Rivals. So when we get back to LCS, then we're going to have all this
ban it.
It's like those were the scrims that they were trying it out against, right?
Exactly. Instead of like doing those scrims before Rift Rivals, then use it in Rift Rivals.
Phoenix goes in on Renekton, he gets slammed, and he's like, yeah, but he probably just played it bad. He probably just played it bad. I can do this. And
well, now we know for sure.
Oh my goodness. So one other thing that I kind of want to point out is I also didn't like what the NA teams ended up doing with their rosters. Obviously, 100 Thieves had executed the Meteos trade the week prior to Rift Rivals, and they had submitted Brandini and Levi to their roster. And that's worth noting because they couldn't necessarily play Onda since the trade had happened after the roster lock. So therefore, they were playing their sub-roster from Meteos, who they traded away. So like, I think when 100 Thieves hits LCS, they're not even going to be playing the Brandini roster. This is just my guess. They're probably going to be playing Onda and Someday. So they were playing a roster they'd never played before at Rift Rivals. And Echo Fox as well wanted to get DeMonte reps because he's been suspended for all of the spring split. So they were playing with weird rosters that they hadn't necessarily put forth before. Their whole thing is about having like two different bottom lanes, one that is Adrian and Lost, and the other one that is Altec and Fang, but they didn't actually bring Fang or Lost, so they had to play with a mismatched bottom lane as well. The mistakes and the disappointment like goes on from not only champion pool to also rosters that the NA team submitted. So those are some of the reasons that I think NA lost to EU at Rift Rivals, but I think the most prominent one is the fact that Europe was just more practiced on the strategies that they brought in, and I thought most of their strategies were better.
Yeah, their teams definitely deserve to win. But looking at from the other side, just to argue maybe for the organizations a bit, while we don't, like those didn't give us the best chance to win all those changes and stuff.
True.
And some of them, their hands may have been forced, right? There have been so much talk about what was going on inside of the team and how things were not working out. And from their view, they want to be as smooth as possible when they start playing the LCS games again to try and qualify. Because 100 Thieves, they have a very good chance at qualifying for Worlds in their first year. Like, that's insane. So, to me, still, what happened inside of 100 Thieves to spawn all these roster changes and the media drama and all that stuff, it had to have been super dramatic.
Yeah.
Because if I was in charge of that team, like, I would have done everything in my power to not have that come about.
Yeah, you're
right?
tied for first. You just made the finals. Your brand is blowing up.
So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, there must have been some crazy stuff that was going on that they're just like, it cannot work because
long term at least.
Yeah, because from the outside you're like, okay, there's
the problem here though is you're using logic, right? And I totally understand it from the logical team owner and team perspective, but I want to be a salty NA fanboy and be pissed that our teams didn't take it as seriously, right? Like, it did feel like the European teams came in more prepared, better practice on those on the actual strategies. G2 clearly looked like the best funneling team. They knew Aatrox and Heimer. I was actually like kind of blown away when I was looking at it. So EU got 8 wins at the event. NA got 5-4 in the groups, then 3-1, right? 7 of their 8 wins were Heimer or Aatrox. Like, come on.
So with that then, last year NA smashed EU at Rift Rivals, and that caused EU to change the way that they play.
So this you're guaranteeing us 2 teams out of groups.
NA got blasted by Aatrox and Heimerdinger, and when I look at pretty much every single high elo solo queue game or every single pro 80 carry bot lane player, they're just spamming Heimerdinger now. Is this like the kick in the butt that NA needed to try and actually play mages and try and emulate some of the stuff that Europe did? Yeah,
I mean, I would say if this spawns a change in the holistic view of how they approach the game, then yes. If this is just literally specific cases of this champion and that champion beat us, all right, we're gonna learn these 2 champions. Then like, that's not gonna do anything for us. Okay, they'll learn Heimerdinger or whatever. He may or may not even be good by the time Worlds comes around or whatever. But if this was more of a big picture, eye-opening thing, then it would be beneficial, and we will take something from it.
You have. I think if this teaches you anything, it shows that EU was better at innovating, that they were better at kind of adapting. And
historically, they have been like that has been one of the biggest strengths.
Yeah, so I think that's like the takeaway for the NA teams, if there really is one, is to be more willing to spend some of your scrims trying out these new strategies, being able to actually like investigate them more thoroughly, try new things, be willing to take more risks in your scrims, because if you're always just emulating what teams are already doing, you're just like always a step behind. I think you have to be kind of on the forefront if you really want to get good international results.
And yet, our most successful team at Rift Rivals was Team Liquid. Doublelift played Kaisa every single game he could get her. And They did have a disappointing upset to Splice
against Heimerdinger.
But yeah,
where Double got one shot and an Aatrox as well in that game. I think
yeah,
it was both.
TL
yeah,
went,
the 2-for-1 combo.
TL went a combined 2-2.
2-2.
Yeah, and Echo Fox went 2-3. So by a hair, Team Liquid was more successful than Echo Fox.
Yep, and I think my thing again is not that, oh my God, NA, why didn't you play these champions? It's just you need to understand your strategy well enough and how to play into the champions, right? Like we've seen we'll get to LCK and LPL, but like a lot of the best teams are playing purely marksman. You don't necessarily have to play a major bot, but you do have to put in the time to understand what these champions do and how to play around it. And I think that very clearly there was tons of examples, not just from the people laning against it, that our players did not understand what these champions were doing. I saw so many times the Aatrox W, the Infernal Chains, where people would get pulled. They try to run out the back, which you can't do. They get pulled back into the middle, and then they flash because they don't even understand that they're going to get reset. Like the Levi 100 Thieves game against G2, that was another example where he's popping off on Graves. In the final fight, he gets Infernal Chains and then doesn't flash out of it and then gets pulled in back in the middle team, then flashes. Like, that happens so many times. People just don't understand even what the characters are doing. And that's just unacceptable.
I would counter with there's a difference between understanding and the muscle memory and the reactions, because while you can look at it and read it and understand, okay, this ability, that lays down a slow zone. If you don't get out, then it's going to pull you back in or whatever, and the back is super long, so don't try running out the back. I have still even been in situations where, like, in the fight, there's so many things you're tracking. Like Levi in that case, he's trying to literally 1v9. He's like, all right, there's a stun coming from here. I got to worry about this guy. The damage is open here. And he's like looking at all these things. You don't yet, because you haven't had enough reps against that, have that ingrained in the process, of your decision making, which is literally in League of Legends is like the most important part about the game is that everyone has these instant reactions, right? Because they've been in situations that hasn't been added to the list yet. Yeah. But I totally agree with you that those are the types of things that it probably doesn't take too many reps before.
I do want to combo off that a little bit before we move on to the LCK LPL Rift Rivals, because I was thinking about this over the weekend. We hold our pro League of Legends players to such an incredibly high mechanical standard, right? It's always, oh man, that guy was at Azonia's, but they missed the taunt. The timing was off. What a boosted play. When I think about when I was playing like Guild Wars, for instance, if you're playing a Hammer Warrior that has knockdowns, you can chain your knockdowns together, and they called it quarter locking, which would be if there was a quarter second to cast certain spells, you needed to be able to time your second knockdown within a quarter second. And there was only like a handful of people who could do that reliably, and they were considered the best. Yet it's just expected that literally every pro player has perfect timing out of Zonia's, has perfect timing out of GA, has perfect timing based on other stuns, taking into account tenacity. Like the stuff that some of these guys are doing is actually super, super difficult. So I agree with you that like it looks really bad when they're running out the back of an Aatrox queue and like it expires before they're out of it, but they could also just not have the timing down yet. Right? Like, they think it's going to last a little bit longer. Like,
I agree with you, but it's also, the Aatrox chain, I don't think is a good one-to-one comparison, because you literally have, like, a second and a half. Like, it's not like, oh my God, but you need these incredible reactions.
You want to save your flash if you think it's not going to pull you back and you think you're going to make it out the back.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think people just didn't even, like, recognize it a lot of times. But I do totally understand what you're saying. And I think part of it is we hold them to such, like, high standards, because this is a game that, like, 100 million people play, and they're the best of the best,
and
right?
They've been pros for 5 years.
And they've been pros for years, and that is the level that you expect, right? Like it's the same thing when you watch the NBA or the NFL or you watch any of these top level sports, when people make mistakes that are tiny mistakes that I would never even be able good enough to get to the point where I could make that mistake, you're still disappointed because it's a different standard.
Yeah. The biggest difference there is that our game that they are at the top of constantly
changing.
Yeah, it introduces these new things, and because you are the best at the current game, when something is introduced, you're also expected to instantly be the best at what is new. And that is a very difficult thing to test.
All right, we'll get to that. But LCK, LPL, Rift Rivals Finals was super exciting. It went 5 games. They had a slightly different format because they had 4 teams from every region. So all 4 teams had to be blind submitted from both teams until Game 5, which was a fresh submit by both teams. This had LPL winning 3-2. Kobe, What are your thoughts?
I was gonna say I got so hyped just watching the VODs from this, because you're talking about like how fun it was to watch this. I mean, ours was fun. Watching it live and playing through it. A little bit less fun for us because we were losing, but
It was fun up until TL lost the splice.
And it was a blast.
Yeah. Oh, the first game when Echo Fox upset GT.
That was fun.
It was fun. We
That
were
was
popping
fun.
off. But whenever I review VODs or whatever, we're studying for Worlds or studying for MSI or something, these international tournaments, and you're going back and you're grinding, it's 100% work, right? You don't really approach it with like super excitement for the game. But these ones, this is one of the first times in a long time that I've been opening up the next VOD like, oh shit, let's game number 2 going, because the crowd is insane. It's
Their stage was
incredibly
nuts.
close. Goes all 5 games. Like, it came down to the LPL's worst place team. They had the Rogue Warriors. They're number 4 in the LPL right now, and they had to clutch it. And they were even like losing at the beginning, and so they brought it back and they gave the chance for RNG to come back in. It was like, it was definitely a super exciting roller coaster. So I don't want to like spoil a lot of the games for people if they're interested in going back and reviewing the VODs.
Okay.
But there are some interesting things that I think we can talk about, right? Like some of the champion differences that we saw and some of the strategy differences that we saw.
So a couple of things on that. I was tracking the strategy diversity because in the NA versus EU final, there was actually like G2 ran funnel mage bot versus a standard Echo Fox, and Echo Fox won. But then the next 3 games, it was literally mage bot versus standard bot, and the mage bot would just win all 3 times. In the LCK final, first game, KT versus IG, mage bot won. Second game, a funnel lost against a standard comp from RNG. Standard is used roughly as mainly like AD carry bottom. You have like an Aatrox mid, and we're still considering it standard just based on our definition. A funnel actually won the third game from a Freak of Freaks. A mage bot won the fourth game. That was the really crazy one from Rogue Warriors with like a Smite Karthus counting as a mage bot. And then the final game was actually standard versus standard because the funnel was disrupted when Xayah Rakan was picked away from each other. So this was actually the most equal to me as far as like differences of strategies. There were multiple funnels tried, there were multiple mage bots tried, there were multiple standards tried, and they all actually had fairly equal success.
Yeah.
But Azale, what were your thoughts on the LCK LPL Rift Rival Finals?
I mean, I'm just honestly pretty excited that League of Legends no longer feels like a one-horse race to me. Like that it's this. There has been enough showings now from LPL at this level. They won Rift Rivals last year. They won Rift Rivals this year. They won MSI. Yes, they lost at Worlds, but like if you count Rift Rivals, that's 3 of the last 4 are LPL. If you don't, then 1 for MSI, 1 for Worlds, and still the Rift Rivals have got to like nudge the needle a little bit. I just think it's so exciting to see that there's so many teams that are actually competing on this level. And I saw a lot of talk on social media about, oh, well, it doesn't really count because Griffin wasn't there and Griffin's so good now. Oh, it doesn't really count because SKT's not playing that well anymore. Oh, well, Kingzone's not at their best form. When have we ever had to make any excuses for LCK before, right? Like that alone to me shows that times are changing, where you take these 4 top LCK teams, they lost straight up in what seemed like an extremely competitive, extremely serious event.
Based on the player reactions, everyone was going.
Yeah, and the interviews, I mean, like you're listening to Faker talk about, like, it's all about winning for the region. Like, it doesn't matter what else happens. You have to win for the LCK and all this stuff. And I'm like, damn, these guys are taking it seriously. They lost last year. I think whether you think it's the most serious event or not, that was a wound, like a wound to their pride. Yep. And we see LPL come out again. We see them take them down. And I mean, I just think it's so exciting to watch like these 2 regions clash at that high of a level. I didn't love watching the LMS games minus Flash Wolves because those didn't feel very competitive. But like the LPL, LCK games were super exciting. I was super impressed that there was like a diverse range of strategies, and also kind of just being selfish for myself, I love seeing that marksmen were succeeding quite a lot as well, right? Like I still love, for all the people that are complaining, saying that marksmen are no longer viable, I can just keep on pointing to Uzi, because Uzi's smashing with marksmen. They're playing mostly standard. They're finding ways to make marksmen work, and I think he's been so incredibly successful at it. And his team is playing at such a high level that it feels like, this is a team that can challenge for the World Championship.
Yeah. To your point about not having to make excuses for the LCK ever before, I think we're very clear, like, moved on from the era of SKT or Samsung White are the best. Korea is number one without dispute, and we can then seed all of those teams at the top, and then start to debate who's coming in second and who's gonna like fill in the rest of the list, because we've already been proven like the one who was supposed to be the next king and come in was King Zone, right? Yep. They've already failed multiple times at international play. No matter how hard they won whatever regular season games, it's definitely feels like we've moved past that era. And while there are other competitors and you're like, oh my God, these new guys, Griffin, like all these random unheard of players, like that's our new best team or whatever. It doesn't count because they weren't there. That's a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, oh, well, you didn't play against our team of rookies that have been
only a year ago
winning all these games. Exactly. So it definitely is way more exciting as far as how open the international events are going to be. So definitely looking forward to this year as well.
Yeah. Do want to throw in a little bit of devil's advocate, though, because do you remember an MSI back in 2015 in Tallahassee?
I do.
When EDG defeated SKT, because that was another time where the Korean exodus had just happened, right? Korea lost all of Samsung, a lot of their best players to the LPL teams. The LPL won MSI. Going into Worlds that year, we're thinking, how good is LGD going to be? We were. We were thinking that.
You brought this up before, and you're like, oh, it's just the same as.
I'm not saying it's the same,
them?
but I'm saying there are similarities, and we need to talk about what is different this year from that particular thing, because Rift Rivals was a tournament that didn't exist. We don't know what the results would have been from there. But Game 4 of the MSI Finals this year was like a 10,000 gold comeback from RNG. It very well could have been a Game 5, much like the EDG back in 2015. But I have what I think is different, but I'll let you go. What is different about this iteration of LPL versus LCK being even?
Not only do we have more examples, the sample size is much bigger of the defeats of LCK.
Based on Rift Rivals.
Well, based on Rift Rivals as well as their teams at Worlds, even though they ended up winning Worlds, they lost a lot more games.
LCK last year?
Yeah.
Yes, SKT had a harder time, but Samsung swept through.
That's true. Samsung did sweep through. But in addition to there being more examples, more games, I had another reason, and you interrupted.
I mean, RNG
now I forgot.
is like the almost all Chinese team, right? Like that's one thing that does give me more faith too. That it's like their region is actually just developing. There's so much talent coming in. When you look at Isla, you look at Jackie Love, and you look at iBoy, and you look at all these guys. It feels like this feels more built up than purchased, which gives me more faith in their region as well as the fact that there is this massive sample size. It's not just one example, and Rift Rivals wasn't there before, to your point, but I do think it's also really exciting that it's not just EDG beat SKT. It's a number of different LPL teams are taking games and being successful against the biggest teams. Like Kingzone was 0-2 in the group stage, right? Like they have been struggling, but it's not just them, right? It's not just any one team. Lots of LPL teams are winning, lots of LCK teams are losing. It just feels like more and more of a pattern is being built up.
Okay, I was gonna say it was in addition to the number of games, it's also if you watch the games in LPL, they're also more varied.
Yep.
And that MSI where EDG won, it was very hype. Like that was a super hype, best of
Undefeated
5.
LeBlanc, Game 5, baby.
Exactly.
Boom.
But it came down to Game 5, and I just thought they had an extremely good draft. I remember, the Morgana came in as well.
I think it was Maokai Lysandra counterpick.
No, it was Morgana.
Morgana.
It was Morgana mid?
100%.
Oh, okay.
Ha!
Yeah.
My memory's bad, but it's not that bad. I was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and everyone was getting super hyped up. But after that, the feeling, at least around the people that I saw on social media, and they were like, "Oh, this is super exciting."
It was an upset.
But it was an upset, right? That was kind of the take on it.
It wasn't LPL is better. It's EDG was better one day.
Yeah, and they were like, oh my God, that's such an intelligent, they totally baited them into this LeBlanc. They fell for it every, hook, line, and sinker. And so I was super impressed with that. But now it's so much more about the whole region, like Azale was saying, rather than that kind of one example.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest difference.
I agree with you that it feels different. I just wanted to bring up the other side because I think back then as well, there was a recent interview with the LPL coaches after winning Rift Rivals, how they think they have actually made changes to the region that make them stronger. I've been saying for 2 or 3 years, based on the player base in China and the player skill, that it should just be a matter of time before LPL is the dominant region. And it always kind of blew me away that Korea was maintaining such dominance over them. And then especially the biggest outlier was always the Rocks Tigers, the Ku Tigers, or the right now Kingzone Dragon X, because that was the closest to Five Guys in a Dream that pretty much anyone had. Like, it was literally just these 5 guys who were struggling to get sponsors, and they were like the best team in the world. So all these arguments around like org structure and coaching didn't necessarily apply to them. But with the LPL now, they're claiming that the organizations are actually empowering the coaches who are now more experienced coaches than they had before. So what happened before, so they say, is that there were all these super talented players, but as soon as they became pros, they just became these like spoiled, entitled players who you couldn't tell them what to pick and you couldn't get them to practice the way you wanted. And the players just ran every single team.
Yeah.
So even if you have all the talent in the world, they were never as organized as the LCK teams. But now they're not where they want to be, but they're closer to having that level of organization that the LCK has been able to attain with the larger player base. So now, with 2 Rift Rivals, with MSI, I think it's becoming a much more level playing field.
So theoretically, the player base argument fully makes sense, right? You have more players, that can't hurt. It should help.
Yep.
That hasn't always correlated though.
Nope.
No, because there's culture, there's practice, there's number of people who are actually trying to be pro, like all those things.
And there are a lot of regions like NA's definitely has like a small player base, but like Brazil, Vietnam, both have very big player bases.
Yeah, I think Vietnam has the second biggest player base now.
It's huge.
Yeah, but
That's what I'd seen some article.
it makes sense though, right? There's no way that having more players playing your game is going to hurt your chances.
Yeah.
You have,
but it's
you
not
have the
the
odds
only
are going to be
contributor
in your
to success.
favor. It should help.
Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't guarantee it.
They also have access to to playing in Korean solo queue and things like that. Some of the Chinese
For
pros
LPL,
play in the LCK like
Anyway.
solo queue, which helps too.
Final question then. Who would you favor to win Worlds after this? The LPL or the LCK? You're way too early prediction.
Then you kind of siphon it down into which team you're picking. And RNG is definitely the front runner right now.
We need to mention that Uzi is temporarily stepping down as well because of a shoulder injury that his doctor says he needs to rest. Keep in mind that he took off the first half of Spring Split as well because of a wrist injury.
Last year.
Last
Split.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Like, literally
That's
the
last
spring split.
Yeah,
And then
off. Totally.
Yeah, all the way until the Lunar New
Yeah,
Year.
because IG. Then
Didn't he
IG
take
left,
off some last year too?
Yeah, he takes off a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
So not worried about Uzi's shoulder at
I
all.
guess I'd say LPL. I mean, I think I'd favor RNG. Like, I don't know that I necessarily favor all their teams over all the other teams, but the fact that Kingzone has been failing internationally consistently, the fact that SKT is looking like weaker than ever.
Griffin.
The fact that Griffin has not shown me.
KT didn't lose any games at Rift Rivals, bro.
The fact that they didn't even think that they were good enough to send out again, Kobe.
Don't send out the undefeated team of chokers.
Yeah,
Kobe.
exactly. But I mean, Griffin, you want to be like, oh, but what about Griffin? And maybe they will totally perform, but I can't, like, if I had to bet right now, if my life depended on it, I couldn't bet on a team that I've never seen play on the international stage, because Griffin right now, like I said earlier, feels like Kingzone a year ago. Yes, it is like Kingzone had more experienced players and so on, but it felt like this unbeatable team. You could never crush this team because they have too much talent. They're too good. They're too, like, they work well too, And then we saw Kingzone go into Worlds and get slammed by Samsung and then lose at MSI and then lose here. So until they show me that they can do it, I probably won't believe it. If I had to bet today, it's on RNG. LPL's favored.
Yeah. To address the Uzi thing, though, because he's taken injury time off so many times, I'm not worried at all. I don't even consider it an injury time off anymore.
You think it's vacation?
I feel like that's what they say when he wants to take a break, because he's so rich and he can just stream and he can, do whatever he wants. He's literally the most popular player in the most populated region.
Yep.
So
biggest league star.
He can actually do whatever he wants.
Probably just the biggest any game star.
And he still comes back every time and he kills it.
Yep.
So I'm like, all right, he's taking his breaks and he still came back and he still was, the best AD carry. So you can take a break then, Uzi. Go ahead.
All right. That was cool.
Who are you favoring?
They also
You guys
their
didn't answer.
backup.
Oh.
Wait, what was their backup's name?
Abel.
Because he was good. Yeah, Abel was actually good too.
They mentioned
So-
that he's actually won all of the matches he's played in the summer split so far.
Yeah, and he had like 20 kills in one of them. So
He smashes.
Who are you favoring? Got to answer the question.
I said RNG
LPL?
at the
Okay,
beginning.
Okay.
I'm going to give LPL 55-45
Okay, there
right
you go.
now. I predicted RNG at MSI as well. I've been hoping that Korea falls for like decades, but no more.
40 years ago.
It was supposed to be us.
NA who takes down Korea?
No one thought that except us.
Yeah,
I
it was
didn't
supposed
say-
to be everyone who's.
I
from
didn't
the
say it was
region.
going to be, but it was
Supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. We're aligned. We're aligned. All right. We're moving on to the meta.
Yeah, I want to talk about state of the game a little bit. Even though we don't have patch 8.14 yet, we still have a lot of developments from Rift Rivals and kind of what that means for the game. I thought that Reckless had a very interesting interview with Travis over MSI. As many people know, Reckless benched himself for Bwipo earlier on in the split, and he said some stuff in the interview. He basically said that in Fnatic's eyes, AD carries should not be playable if you have a talented mage or bruiser player in the bottom lane, and that as they move towards playing better and better competition, it's the superior strategy. So when Travis pushed him to basically say, well, what about all these other teams that are winning with AD carries? Reckless said, well, I think that's because they're playing against first-time Vladimirs, first-time Swains, and they're actually just not doing it properly. So as far as Reckless's arc, he thought they were going to buff up AD carries again. And now that they haven't, he's now starting to play the mages. So he's kind of in this murky ground where he doesn't feel like he has a place. However, we are seeing still different teams taking different approaches. And I wanted to kind of update again where we think the meta is. Is it in a place where there actually are 3 viable strategies of funnel, mage bot, or standard? Or is there one strategy that's starting to reign supreme and it's just a matter of mastering the champions?
I think that being able to do all of them is an advantage, but you can succeed doing any of them. I think that they're all viable, and I think for Reckless to say that the only reason other teams are really successful is because the people they're playing against aren't playing it well enough is like you're living in a dream world. Like that's just you being in denial to say that Uzi and RG, who's beating everyone in LPL and who just beat everyone at Rift Rivals, and like that no one can play these champions. I really don't think that it's only in Europe that these teams are just like so much better than everywhere else in the world. I just think that these players are better practiced at the marksman. Their teams are playing better around it. And I think that you can play a variety of strategies. I think that Fnatic would be well served by being able to run both, and having him back on a marksman, if they can work that in, is very advantageous. But I think at the end of the day, it's better to have one person who can do it all, right? Of course, but not many
that's
players
not realistic.
can. Exactly. And I mean, Deft did perform very well on Vel'Koz, for example, and that's going to be an advantage for any team who has the flexibility to do it because you don't need to make a sub before the draft, so you're not giving away your strategy. That being said, though, there's examples of teams who are doing almost exclusively one type of strategy for almost all of these strategies and being successful. So I don't think you need to do it. Griffin and teams like this, are doing so much mage bot. G2 is doing all this funnel. RNG is doing all this standard. TL is doing all this standard, etc. Like you can do whatever you want as long as you're good enough.
I did really quickly take some numbers from just the NAEU Rift Rival final and the LCK LPL Rift Rival final. Mage bots were 6-2, funnels were 1-2, and standards were 3-7. Just to add some very small sample size data into it. Kobe, what are your thoughts?
I think so. I do agree that it's definitely an advantage to be able to play both.
Yeah.
And when all the complaints were coming up, I understood where the complaints were coming from of people who have only, played AD carries or whatever for their whole life, their whole league experience, right? Multiple years. However, when AD carries did make their way to mid lane, right? We had Lucian and stuff like that. I don't remember hearing any mid laners complaining.
Oh, I got to play a marksman now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even though Lucian as kind of the example, when he moved in, like he was the major mid lane bully, right? Everyone just got like pushed out when he first made his way in there, and like you couldn't play like a lot of
things into him,
Xerath and anything like that. That's just kind of an aside, like the holistic view, and I know that they are trying now to make more small changes to try and accommodate the possibilities of using all types of champions down there,
Yep.
which is like a very
It's
lofty goal.
It's an ambitious goal, but it's definitely what they're going
right,
for.
but it's what they're going for. And we don't have a lot of time, on this patch yet. Still, we're looking back at the data for pro games, and there are plenty of examples of both sides being successful. And it's hard because we don't have that level of the pro player as far as in the matchup, feeling what it's like. But we can look at the pro games. Plenty of them are being successful with them as well. Also, if you want the bigger sample size, you always go to worldwide solo queue. You can draw from that and the win rates, which, to be fair, do not always correlate with professional picks. We have had many times had like 40% solo queue win rate champions be pick and ban or close to it in professional play, like Azir and things like that. Scattered throughout the solo queue, at least, numbers are AD carries. The consistency here, though, is that the ones that rely very heavily on crit items are much further down the list. And that makes sense because crit was one of the main avenues that was like double nerfed because they nerfed base stats for AD carry champions as well as the crit items. And I know that, they, on the PBE and even in the last patch, they've been starting to make these small buffs back towards it to buff it up a little bit. But I think it'll be very interesting when we end up with, the best way to scale is to have a marksman. Now you need to craft your strategy around making sure that you can have this scale so you can have these true damage crits firing off, late game, and you'll be able to for sure win the team fights if you can protect him.
Which is the
versus,
case.
more early game orientation. You get a level 6, you have a lot more burst damage with mages. It's intuitive, I feel like. And makes a lot of sense with how you're going to want to draft around those different champions in the bottom lane.
And I do think that difference exists already in the solo queue game. If you're going to take a crit scaling marksman and your team is able to get you to late game, you're still going to dominate. But pro play in particular, because of how coordinated people are, always makes better advantage of early game advantages. I think that's one of the reasons that Aatrox is so busted, is because his level 1 is the best in the game. And he gets that early edge that is larger than other early edges, and you play through that the entire time. So I think with the current balance, while I don't 100% agree with Reckless that he's just a useless player because he hasn't mastered these 10 mages, that when people are continuing to practice these mage bots with no farther changes to AD carry scaling, we're going to see mages probably 75% of the time is kind of my gut, because of their ability to bully lane at level 6, because of the flexibility they give your support to roam once you leave him, and because of how difficult it is to actually scale up into that point. It doesn't mean that AD carries are unviable. I think Uzi will always be able to be one of the top 5 players in the world in that position, even if he doesn't play mages. But I do think most teams are going to trend towards mages.
For me, I just hope that the balance team, and I actually want them to also make it so that these champions are viable for our players at home. Because I totally understand there are so many players that are very upset with those changes because they only like playing, Twitch, Jinx, these crit 80 carries, right? And that's what they've spent years playing.
So I think
both those
they're
champions
more
have over 51% win rate.
I actually think they're more viable in solo queue than they are in pro.
Yeah.
And if that's true, like that's what I want for the players, right? So that they don't feel like they can't play their, these champions.
Totally.
Now, even if they say they can't play these champions, that's not always true, right? Your reaction to getting blasted in lane a lot of the times is, I can't play against this, right?
Yeah.
I've had that, right?
And then you would literally win the game that you couldn't play. You're like, I can't play this champ again.
They're like, it's impossible to win this matchup, right? And then you try and play the reverse of it, and
sometimes it is impossible to win the matchup, but it's still very possible to win the game. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to play that way.
Yeah, totally agreed. It's not always fun to get slammed in lane.
One last thing I want to talk about as far as meta before we move on to the North American LCS is the funneling strategy. So Medler posted his quick thoughts today, July 7th, and he basically went into a little bit more detail on some of the proposed changes to nerf funneling. So as is kind of the current trend, the bottom lane is deemed to be mostly okay, with some small buffs to marksmen still probably coming, but funneling is something the balance team definitely wants to attack. So the changes that they are going for is they say there's not enough, there's not an elegant fix without too much collateral damage. But because funneling is a strategy they want to get rid of, it's time to put in a little bit less intuitive, less clear change. So the temporary solution is to heavily reduce gold from lane minions if you have a tier 1 or tier 2 jungle item and have the most gold on your team. So once you've completed a warrior or a Cinderhulk or a Runic Echoes, you won't get punished. But in that initial funneling portion where you have either the challenging sprite that's not completed or just the talisman, if you have the most gold, you're not going to be able to snowball your gold ahead of the team. What do you guys think of that attack?
So my initial thought, like, it was talking about like the actual gold differences at different times. My thought is this doesn't really do much of anything. I was actually looking at a specific game, looking at G2 versus Echo Fox and their funnel game and the gold benchmarks. So
that's a game where the funnel got pretty black. Like that was a 2v2 that was pretty even.
Yeah. So this exactly. So this is the G2. This is G2 game, I believe, where G2 was funneling, right? And so they don't even have a massive amount of gold, right? And basically,
what Jai was saying is like that was a poor funneling game.
Yeah, that's a game where the funnel didn't
actually
work.
did not have a big lead in CS. They messed up.
I know. That's
Okay.
actually going to show my point more. So the gold you need for a jungle item complete is 26-25 for Blood Razor, for Runic Echoes, for Warrior, the ones that you're going to actually build.
Right.
You actually reach, even in this game, perks reach that gold benchmark at about 7 minutes.
Okay.
Right. So it's like, if we talk about like benchmarks, gold benchmarks at 15 minutes and how far ahead they are, you can get that completed gold item at 7 minutes. Like you're not actually massively ahead most of the time in gold.
But would you get it at 7 minutes with the nerfs is the question.
Yeah,
because he has the most gold.
He's not really ahead of the rest of the people on his team, or very slightly, right? Like a lot of people, I feel like, I mean, maybe it is gonna make a bigger difference than I think, but I just feel like you can complete it so early that it's not affecting your scaling for the most part. And generally speaking, in the gold funneling games I've watched, maybe I'm misrepresenting this, but I feel like they are not massively ahead of where their top laners are and some of their solo laners are.
But as long as they're ahead at all, they're going to get less gold.
The degree to being ahead doesn't matter. Like that's the whole point, right? If he is 10 CS, 2 jungle camps or whatever ahead.
Well, you're still getting more gold than that person though. Like so, because yes, you are getting 10 reduced gold on the minions, but that only kicks in when you have more gold than them, and that is not affecting the jungle monsters whatsoever. So you're still going to have more gold theoretically like, in this world where you're outpacing them. And I still believe that you're going to be able to complete your jungle item at like 7-8 minutes, and then it does not affect you at all. I think this is like a hit to it, but I don't think that it's like massively changing the strategies. And when I've seen it in solo queue, the people are often not even very far ahead until later once they actually like really get going. And those types of games, I don't think it affects. It only really affects the games that are like where everything is so optimal and you're completely maximizing farm and you're blasting way ahead of them. Then you can complete it that much faster. And it maybe like slows that down a bit, but like even with the new strategies where people are 2v2ing mid, like that is holding the funnel down, so they don't even really skyrocket ahead in gold until later on.
I do think that this slows it down more than you're thinking,
because as long as you have more gold than other people, like imagine that range minions give you 4 gold if you have a jungle enchantment, right? That makes the early game funnel useless until 7 or 8 minutes as far as getting ahead, because someone on your team would actually have to have more gold than you in order to actually farm up to your jungle enchant. So if it delays that enchant by 1.5 minutes, I actually think that's pretty huge.
However, regardless of that,
regardless of whether or not
the
effect.
I have problems with this that aren't with the actual changes and the way of thinking about going about solving this problem. So one of the main things that they drill into you in school, or at least for me, for engineering, has always been root cause analysis and solving the root cause of the problem and not attacking the symptoms. In their explanation here, where they mentioned the other ideas that they came up with and why they went with this admittedly heavy-handed and ugly, like they use a lot of these terms to describe their own change, is because they feel like the biggest difference that they're seeing is in the champion having around 50% more gold at the 15-minute mark than the opposing mid laner. That is the symptom. That is like if, so the example for engineering would be if there's a crack in your dam and there's a bunch of water flooding the town below. They're like, there's a shit ton of water in the town. Let's get helicopters over there and buckets and bail out the town. Whereas what they teach you to do is first plug the hole in the dam. Then you can treat the symptoms afterwards. And I don't feel like putting this weird cap on the person that's getting all this gold, and you're like, now the gold is capped.
What I really don't like about it is that if you have the most gold, you don't know that you have the most gold until you farm.
I wasn't even done yet.
Okay.
But exactly. You can't check where these measurements are. So these are unseen borders that are being put on you. In addition, there are other things that could naturally happen in the game. Obviously, if I'm a jungler, I'm getting like a triple kill or something early on, then I can't tax the opponent's lane as hard or whatever.
Or even just push out the wave. If you have a 2v2 top, you get a double kill, your top laner
and
dies.
You get 12 gold for clearing the back wave.
Yeah.
And, people have been complaining about solo carrying. This would limit some more super hard solo carrying of a jungler for their jungle position. As Azale said, you should be able to complete your jungle item pretty quickly anyway.
Right.
But those are just kind of some problems with the overall kind of approach that I had with this solution. And I know that they're well aware that this is not, a great solution or whatever. So they're probably thinking of this as a Band-Aid while they work on it more and come up with something.
That is what they say. They think they're going to, they actually kind of want this Band-Aid to happen until preseason. Like they're hoping.
That's actually a long time.
Yeah, they're hoping to Band-Aid it, and then when the larger scale changes are going to be hitting.
Yeah. It's funny too, because I was talking to some people on playtest that were testing these changes, and they were saying they were just winning with funnel every game anyway, and
so that's probably where
they've been doing a lot of iterations.
Yeah.
This, right. So like they've tested experience changes, they've tested support item changes, they've tested this. They're trying to find the most. And like to Kobe's point, I agree with you that there's a lot of flaws to this. But do you have would you rather hit support items? Do you have a more elegant solution, or have you just not put?
I can't solve the problem right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's part of the problem.
I haven't put any effort into it. So,
all right,
moving on.
Sweet. Either way, they're going to continue to hit funneling. Let's move on to the North American LCS. Week 4 is coming up. Let's first start with that log jam we have at the top of the standings. One team that's there that didn't play in Rift Rivals is Team Solomid. This week, they play 100 Thieves and Echo Fox, two teams that did play in Rift Rivals, so it will be a good opportunity to put some space between them and the other teams at the top of the table, considering they actually would have a hard schedule in that case. They're playing 2 4-2 teams. How do you see that panning out?
The kind of funny thing about this, I feel like, is if TSM has a good week, then all the NA fans have like their excuse ready. It's like, well, our good team wasn't at Rift Rivals, that's why we lost. But I think, I mean, it is a really big week for TSM. But there's kind of been this dark cloud over TSM ever since they got knocked out of quarterfinals, and people have just kind of, I feel like, forgot that they were so good at the end of spring. Yeah, I mean, it's just like everyone's like, well, TSM blows. It's like, well, they went 10-1 in their last 11.
All right, not everyone.
Not everyone, but the general perception, right? Like, I'm not talking specifically about you, Kobe. Don't worry. But I do feel like this is an opportunity for them to kind of prove themselves, right? Like, it seems like they have been really working hard and kind of trying to improve. But there's still questions about their roster, even like, Grig and Mike Young and these sorts of things. We also don't know
why didn't they pick up media? So
maybe they want to. We don't know like what 100 Thieves is going to run. We don't know what Echo Fox is going to run. So this is kind of like a big week for, I think, all those teams, and maybe trying to like solidify what their roster is going to look like going forward, and really showing again that they can compete at the top.
Yeah, and for TSM, I wonder if we're going to see an actual change in strategy from them versus continuing to play Varus, Kai'Sa,
I think that's what we're going to get.
Did you see
forever.
Bjergsen and Grig practicing funnels on stream?
Yeah, that was like 2 weeks ago, dude. They should be super polished by now.
Yeah, could very well be the case. I don't expect.
I think if TSM doesn't do well this week, it's a really bad sign. I think that especially with 100 Thieves most likely playing with the new jungler and Echo Fox actually looking like the weakest version of Echo Fox we've seen with the way they lost at Rift Rivals. This is technically a golden opportunity for TSM to actually move into first place, or at least to tie for first place with Team Liquid.
So these teams do have different goals, like slightly different goals, because Echo Fox, 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, they went far in spring. They have lots of championship points. These teams are trying to win spring, and then the second spot is awarded on championship points. So those two teams can immediately go to Worlds. Some of these teams, the large percentage chance for them to get in is they're going to have to play their way through to qualify for the third spot for Worlds, right?
Right,
So you'll
regional
have to play
qualifier.
in the regional qualifier anyway. And TSM, because they got knocked out so early, they don't have a lot of points to rely on. So as long as they get to a point where they feel like they're strong enough to go through the regional qualifiers, that might be the main goal. I don't know if the main goal is always to win, right? Always to win spring. But some of these teams, I feel like, should be adjusting where they're looking at for their endpoint if they're going through things like roster changes and they're trying to shift things around. Then you kind of have to focus, right? You can't go for everything at once.
Yeah, TSM needs to look more short term maybe than some of the other teams because, like you say, like they don't really have championship points, whereas 100 Thieves is kind of sitting in a better spot. If you're 100 Thieves, you just made a big roster change. Maybe you try to really figure out your style and look more towards Worlds because you're guaranteed to at least be in the regional gauntlet, whereas TSM isn't even guaranteed that, right? Like they need to get a good seeding and do decent in playoffs, and playing the same way that they have played and what they're comfortable with probably is the best chance. Like I was just looking at Sven's solo queue, and he has been putting in some Heimer games and whatnot. Like he has Heimer games, he has Mord games, he has all these different bot lane games, but his top 7 most played are all marksmen, even in solo queue, right? So it's not like he's spamming these champions and he has 15 games of Heimerdinger or whatever. So they're like he's putting in some time, but I'm thinking that TSM I've always struck me as a team that like this is the way we play and we just polish this way, and it feels like that's not going to really change because there's like other factors that they're probably more concerned about getting right, which is fitting in Greg or fitting in Mike Young and really kind of working better together.
Yeah, he has 17 games on Heimerdinger.
Okay, there you
go.
And because his 80 carries spawn through spring as well. Like Sven is actually, to me, a player that's played a lot of these in solo queue, but just hasn't brought them out in LCS. He's got 42 games of Swain, 37 games of Vladimir, 23 games of Brand, and that's just on that account.
Is Sven even who you're looking at if you're looking at improving this team too? Because I think Mithy, and even self-admittedly, he's been, in his own eyes, underperforming pretty heavily.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if it is that much about deciding on the specific strategy to run. You can say, okay, we're decided we're going to play all or most of our games in this way. And they need to work on, individual improvements from the underperformers and then on the cohesive team strategy just to literally get that down.
Mithy's having a rough time in solo. 2-13 in his last 15.
Ooh.
I know.
How's his Gragas, by the way? He's someone who I've seen play a lot of Gragas.
He has 38 Gragas games played, 53% win rate.
That's the one pick that I've seen a lot of from these guys in solo queue, but it just hasn't made it to the LCS.
He's a 70% win rate on Thresh.
Where's the Thresh, man?
Where's Thresh at?
Anyway, speaking of the championship points, though, TSM has 10, Cloud9 has 10. That actually puts them in a situation where if they miss playoffs, they miss the regional qualifier. So that puts a lot of pressure on our last place team in the North American LCS, who has made it to 5 consecutive world championships, Cloud9.
Sole possession of 10th.
Sole possession of 10th.
Current.
They play FlyQuest and CLG, and the number one question is what will their starting roster be and what should it be?
I think it's your previous team. It's Sneaky and Jensen are back in. Smoothie is in. I think they say, all right, boys, we had a good run with the academy team.
1-5, right?
All right, boys. Is everybody motivated?
Yeah.
Motivated? Motivated?
You're looking pretty
I'm
motivated. Sneaky's like asleep,
Nice
like,
1-5 start, boys. Get motivated.
Yeah, I think you abandon the plan. I mean, it feels bad because I think that Golden Glue has individually looked pretty good. I think he is put in a pretty good performance, but they're not winning. I think it's time to go back to your veteran players. I mean, I've had this conversation with a couple pros, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, well, Jensen and Sneaky probably would have had a couple more wins at least. Like everyone's like,
well, a couple more wins means they're 3-3.
Exactly. Everyone's like, well, they can't be that bad with the regular team. These guys made it to World Quarterfinals. I think it's time to go back to basics. See if Sneaky and Jensen can get you some wins, because Sneaky is playing a lot. He's doing well well in Academy. He's spamming solo queue as he always does. Like
he's looking great in cosplay.
He's looking good.
Looking good, playing good.
Looking cute, feeling cute, you know. He's doing good.
He's motivated, man.
He's an all around. He's a modern man.
So I think that's a hard thing to argue against because no one's going to be like, hell yeah, I want to see some more of this. They got us to 10th place. It's pretty easy to be like, change some stuff up, bro.
Yeah. And especially when changing some stuff up is going back to the person that everyone wanted to be playing in the first place. All the fans wanted Sneaky in the first place. He's a big fan favorite. He has had success with them for so long.
This is an interesting point. And there's a little bit of a tangent, but because we've had so many, player swaps and the trades are getting so much focus, while you do want, to build a big fan base, right? And like you're saying, Sneaky is the fan favorite. Everyone wants to see him play. If Cloud9 had put Sneaky in, and they had lost all these games and they were 10th, and we were in kind of the reverse situation, but they had been like talking about this the whole time. Do you think at a 10th place Cloud9, if they had played with the old roster up until this point, do you think people would be calling for the reverse and bringing up academy players? Because what people really like is winning.
Yep.
Yes.
Now,
and making worlds.
Do your sponsors and your fans, they love, individual players and personalities. Do they love that more than winning? Now that hasn't, panned out or whatever. You're not going to instant be undefeated or whatever if you switch. But theoretically, if we push it to the extremes, I think that's a fun thought experiment.
I think no matter who is on your roster, if you have the last place LCS team and the first place academy team, you're going to say, give those academy boys some reps.
Even if it's the extremes of you were literally Sneaky and Bjergsen, the two most popular players.
Yes,
I think
if Bjergsen is losing every game,
people turn on
and
you.
Blaze Olive is the best player in Academy going legendary every game, you put him in for a game. If it means you're not going to make it to Worlds. Now, the thing is, this is the worst case scenario for Cloud9. The fact that they did it early when public perception wasn't ready, and now it's failed.
Yeah.
Because the growing pains of Academy players is usually closing late game victories. They have the second best early game in the LCS to Counter Logic Gaming, and then by far the worst late game.
Yeah.
So based on the hint of success, do you still put Sneaky back in? I think you have to at this point, because otherwise it's just a double lose, and at least at this point you're giving him a chance. But it's because of the results, it's a disaster.
And there's no more time to ramp up. Like you said, you didn't finish high enough in spring to even guarantee you that get into the regional gauntlet. They have a big run to make to even make playoffs, right? Like they have to have a pretty damn decent record to even get to playoffs at this point, and just getting the first round may not even be good enough, right? Like they want to try to really have some instant results, and I think to your point, Kobe, one of the big reasons that people did not accept this change, of Sneaky being subbed out, is they didn't see Sneaky losing. Right? Like, I think that's a big part of it. You think of Sneaky, you look back, okay, you say, okay, well, yeah, they lost in spring or whatever, but people still have, Cloud9 as a playoff team, Cloud9 as a Worlds quarterfinals team every time, and Sneaky there for all of it. And then, obviously, all this stuff kind of happened off camera, right? We're told, okay, well, he's not motivated. Okay, well, they're getting slammed in scrims. No one got to watch that except the team, right? So the team goes through this progression of are we really going to stay up Sneaky? Oh, well, I guess he keeps losing. I guess we got to do it, right? Like the fans miss all that. So I think if you put him on stage in the LCS and he just gets blasted every game, like they were apparently losing in scrims every game, that happens on stage instead. Then the fans start to go, okay, well, Sneaky sucks, I guess. Bring in
fickle fan.
Yeah.
Drop him. But at that point,
a lot of fans are.
But at that point, are you saying it is more worth it to have the approval of your fans, or make the call that you think?
No, you make the right call. You make the right call, and the fans will come around.
Because that's what they think they did when they subbed him at the start of the year. Like they were just expecting to get blasted.
Winning is the cure for everything. I truly believe.
For sure.
But this is the worst of both worlds, because they made the decision that was unpopular, and they're in last place.
Exactly. Your point that multiple of our most popular teams have made big public relation blunders.
Yeah.
this year, right? The Cloud9 one, obviously, they could have handled it a lot better. Even if they did the exact same changes, like if they had approached it better and been on top of it earlier, it would have probably come across at least a little bit better.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't have people fully on board, 100 Thieves as well.
Yep.
They felt like they didn't have anything ready to go, and they were catching up. That's why we're all like, something crazy must have happened on the inside. And even back to the beginning of the split, TSM's change with double lift and stuff like that was, everyone knew that was going to be a big fan thing as well. So
yeah,
yeah,
there's still a lot to be solved.
They can definitely improve in some of these areas
in the next 6 weeks of LCS. Does Cloud9 make playoffs?
No.
Just blanket statement right now. I think yes. I think they're going to do it.
I just want to
make
see
playoffs.
I want to see them squeak into playoffs. So then our stories for the regional qualifiers are going to be like, can they make the miracle run again?
Do you want to do a bet?
I don't feel confident enough to make a bet. This is just a random blanket statement.
Oh,
I don't feel confident. They're 1-5. They're loaded last.
I'll take a bet. What the hell?
Yeah.
All right,
They'll make playoffs.
All right, we'll make
Shame.
Okay,
Shame.
well, what do you want to bet? What's the bet?
I don't know.
Wager's going to have to be decided later.
Twitter, send us ideas for the Untitled Chat bet. We'll pick the best one on the next episode because the payoff for this is playoffs. It's like 6 weeks away.
I just think that the teams, like my initial gut reaction of them not making playoffs is just because you look at spring, all the teams were so close together already, and it feels similar to that in summer, but they're starting at a 3-game disadvantage.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting some good ideas already for this bet.
We'll cover it later.
Involving Cloud9, and they are heavy into cosplay.
They are.
As well as putting makeup on
There's
dudes.
probably some type of cosplay related.
So you're
with this.
saying they do get in. He's saying they don't get in. If they make it into the regional qualifiers,
maybe the winner wears cosplay. Who knows?
the winner puts the makeup on the loser who has to cast Cloud9 in the regional qualifiers in the makeup. Boom!
He's not even a caster anymore.
That's true.
Maybe you go
But
cast.
we'll
for
put him
like-
up there.
I mean, especially if Sneaky's still in the academy
In a
team when they make
wheelchair.
playoffs. Maybe like cast the academy finals in cosplay or something. We'll see.
Oh yeah, I'm feeling this.
All right,
This is good.
we'll figure it out. Nothing locked in yet. Let's move on to Twitter. Amin Issa, Dr. Uthgar says lots of players talk about not sleeping to practice for this meta. Tons of cognitive function literature shows the degradation of performance because of lack of sleep. Sure, grinding games familiarizes players with champs, but quality over quantity. Thoughts?
How many players have talked about this? I saw some stuff about LCK players talking about like burning the midnight oil, like everyone's not sleeping to do it, but I haven't really seen.
I mean, LPL coaches talked about at Rift Rivals how they frequently practice from noon until past midnight.
Yeah.
So like 2 a.m. or something, and then they start again the next day, so like 14 hours a day.
And that's super extreme, but you could still sleep your eight hours during that. I mean, I think if you're giving up sleep to practice extra, that is not going to actually help you, and especially over time, I believe that you are going to like really pay the price. You are going to get worse and worse over time, and you can yes, you can be super extreme. You don't need to practice more than like 14 or 15 hours a day, which still gives you some time to eat and 8 hours of sleep, right? And that is the most extreme.
The difference between 14 hours of practice and 8 hours of sleep versus 18 hours of practice and like 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
The 4 hours of sleep is worth much more than that extra 4 hours of practice.
Yep.
In that scenario.
Yeah, I actually looked at a lot of the scientific studies that they did when I was in college in this area because I was very curious about, procrastination, all-nighters, stuff like that.
Justifying your procrastination.
It was overwhelmingly your retention, your long-term retention, drastically inhibited if you are losing out on sleep.
Yep.
Because your brain needs that time to reset, or you'll develop these chemical imbalances. But in the short term, like if you cram right before the test, your short term, you should be able to like keep that, but that's not what you're training for in League of Legends. Like I keep trying to like bring up, you're training for, these instant reactions, right? So you don't have to think through a lot of the processes, and a lot of it is muscle memory. So I think a heavy training schedule is important for a game like this, so that you get as many things to practice down that you don't have to think about them and they become natural reactions, but not at the cost, of at least a baseline of sleep, normal sleep.
I've heard this one, and I've heard a few players mention as well. Since you did the research, I want to ask you the question.
This was
You're the source of knowledge.
We're testing your cognitive.
Yeah.
Cognitive.
All right. I got you.
Multiple nights.
Let me go find it again.
Okay. Multiple nights of having a lack of sleep drastically inhibits your attention or learning ability. But one night on short amounts of sleep doesn't have that big of an effect, is what I've read. So, like, as long as you're well rested, you can have one night with 4 to 6 hours.
Or the World Finals, all-nighter.
Be fine. But it's when you have subsequent nights in a row that it starts to have a negative impact on your performance.
I looked these up when I was in college still.
So if you're grinding, you can have that one night before the tournament without much sleep, and it's fine as long as you got good rest the night before.
I do remember, I think it was like 3 days in a row of like 4 hours or something of sleep. They did a test, and someone who was drunk, like their blood alcohol level was like twice the legal limit or something, performed better in this test than the person that hadn't gotten the sleep.
There you go. More justifying. Kobe's like, well, I can get wasted and not sleep, and I'll be fine.
Put them together, they cancel each other out.
Exactly. And I think the last thing I will say is that I think it's also like the memory stuff. Like maybe you're not punished on memory as much for having one night with a lack of sleep, but it's also like reaction times, I would assume, would be delayed. And if you have poor practice, one of the biggest things, I actually think having poor practice is much worse than having no practice, because your practice lies to you. Right? Like if I'm in there on Aatrox and I'm playing like shit because I'm tired and you slam me, well, is Aatrox bad or am I bad? You didn't learn anything. And in some cases, it actually teaches you the wrong result. So that's why I think even more so in a game like League of Legends, you have to be rested. You have to be performing well to even know what the practice is telling you.
Especially in our game where the matchups, pro players constantly disagree.
Yep.
Someone will message me on DM or whatever after I said something on cast that literally a pro player told me this matchup plays this way, and they're like, nah, it's completely the opposite. You just have to hit them with the spell.
Yeah. Next Twitter question from Evan Flores at Wintersteel23, who literally made this Twitter account just to send us this tweet.
What a lad.
Appreciate it.
One like.
That's a man.
Actually, Twitter should appreciate us.
Yeah, for making him sign up for Twitter so accounts in there using.
Do we get a referral fee?
Yeah. Bjerg has been here for years. He doesn't take an import slot, but people still say he's an EU mid. If he denounced EU and said he was an NA mid, would we consider him to be an NA mid? Citizenship. At what point do we start considering an import to be an NA player? I like
where your head is at, Evan. Dave, our producer, will totally agree with this as well. We'll have a ceremony.
So I'm going to get blamed for this.
We'll make him denounce
Evan
you.
is the name of our EU writer. Is this from our EU writer asking us a question about Bjergsen? I tried to look this up.
I doubt it.
You doubt it? Yeah. It's happened before where they sneak in those Twitter questions. Yeah, we'll find out. I don't remember his last name.
At what point is an NA mid? I mean, he plays for a North American team, but he's never going to become North American. Like, I mean, I guess if he gets citizenship, he could start.
It's not the writer.
But
I just checked.
I mean, at what point is an important NA player? I don't know. I mean,
I think it is citizenship, but at the same time, I look at like basketball. Dirk Nowitzki, he's been in the NBA for 20 years. Like, do you consider him like an American? It's like no, he's this amazing German basketball player who's played in the NBA for 20 years.
And the European fans would never consider him North American, even if North American fans consider him North American.
But I still take pride in him succeeding.
Well, yeah,
because he plays for our league.
It depends on
one of the best North American mids. Let's go, baby.
It's an individual's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Some people are like, wherever you're born, that's where you are, what you're from, and you can't change where you were born.
Yeah.
So even if you lived here 100 years,
if Bjergsen says he renounces EU, he's North American, and eats a hamburger live on broadcast and eagle soars over his head, then he's American and no one can deny it.
But there's like a certain element of how much are they now part of the NA environment versus the EU environment. Like they always say, the longer a Korean player stays here, like...
Oh, Bjergsen is all in the NA
He's all in the NA environment. He's solo queued here for 6 years. He's played on TSN, well, 5 years. I'm losing track of time. But I think there is something to it of he's very much an NA LCS player now. And I think that breakpoint actually does happen around like 4 or 5 years where it's so far in your past that it doesn't matter as much anymore. Like I've lived now in LA for 6.5 years. I grew up in Canada and I feel at this point like pretty attached to Los Angeles and Santa Monica because that's where I live. And I still go home, right? But the longer I'm here, the more I feel like
I'll always be Canadian, and I've been in the States for over 5 years, but it's individual, totally.
Give it a few more years.
Yeah.
Last question. Phil Muir at Snipe Brown says, how would you guys feel about allowing LCS coaches to remain on stage during games and be the sixth man shot caller? Akin to sports like football, basketball, etc., which teams would see the most substantial improvement? And I will say that this is a bit of a different question, because when you say it's akin to sports like football and basketball, there are specific windows when coaches are able to communicate with their team. Basketball coaches try and shout plays at point guards sometimes, and that's like a play calling system. Other teams just run freely and call timeouts. Football, there's actually a window in the play clock where a coach can speak directly to one of their players on the offensive or defensive end only for that little bit of time, and then that person relays it to the rest. So there's some level of communication, but this would imply that a person is literally talking to the team the entire time. What do you think good background would be?
This one has actually come up a lot over the years at different points, and as the game has changed, kind of the answer has also changed, but I personally don't like it, and I wouldn't want it to be incorporated, because I like that our game is so much about decision making and about how you're thinking about the strategy of what the overall team is trying to accomplish, while also focusing on, executing with your champion, right? And if we have coaches in that position, then some teams will still have like their player in-game shot callers or whatever. Some will have the coach like trying to yell things or shout things at them, or maybe we have players. We would have more of a trend of super good players becoming coaches, just because of how they think about the game, like in the game and split second decision making. But I think it completely changes our sport.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a couple times before, and we kind of eventually came to the conclusion that probably shouldn't happen, I think, at least from our opinion. I mean, I just generally think that, it tests a different set of skills then, right? Like, and then in the ideal world, you have like the genius who sits in the back and tells like the mechanical monkeys what to do, right? Like you sit there and like, I can click my mouse real fast, but I have no idea what to do or who to click on. But you're like, all right, go top. Okay, do the grump. All right, go. Like that to me takes away some of like what is super impressive about the game is that there's so many different things that you have to manage. There's so many different decision trees that you have to actually look at. And you talked earlier in the episode about like the standards that we hold the pro players to, about being able to do all these incredible things, and holding them to those standards is why, for me, it is so exciting when someone makes everything work. When they have that beautiful game where everything is perfect, the jungler's always there to counter gank, they have the most farm, they've warded everything, they've smite Steal the Dragon, they do everything, and you're just like, holy crap, like that was actually incredible. And I think you lose a lot of that if you just have someone standing behind him being like, Kobe, do Gromp, Kobe, smite now, Kobe, go bot, Kobe, go, like this.
I also think would be incredibly hard for everyone involved to like actually get good. What is the coach watching? Which screen are they paying attention to? How do they have the knowledge of all the matchups at once? You can't see
It would certainly make coaching more important.
Do they get their own computer to spectate, right? Or do they actually have to just like look over everyone's shoulders? Right?
Running around.
Sliding back and forth on a chair.
Yeah, exactly. Just telling Mike Young where to go. Like it would be a mess to implement. I think if it was perfected, sure, it would improve the level of play a little bit, but I agree. I like the game the way it is.
It would also make it so different from people at home, right? So how do I transition to being a pro player? I'm challenger in solo queue or whatever. I start flaming the pro players because they don't even know what they're doing. Monkeys, someone's telling them what to do. I'm better than them.
Yeah, anyway, League is good with 5 players and a coach for Picks Bans. That is going to do it for this episode of Dive. Thank you for tuning in. Also, a reminder, we are being forced to do a promo for Euphoria, which we're really thrilled about. So keep an eye out for that. It should probably release at next week's episode. Otherwise, the NA LCS returns this weekend, starting on Saturday with NA LCS Countdown at 1:30 Pacific time. And that's followed by Counterlogic Gaming versus Echo Fox. See you then.
Hey, we got graphics.
Woo!
Did you see
graphics?
Boom, 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 boom.
It was at the